Carlos Nelson with Cascade Media Group. And today we have someone that's been on the show at least three different times over the last decade, Miss Lora McDonald. She's with Moore Square. And as I said to Laura, I said, Laura, Mr. Nelson, we don't know what's going on in the town like we should. And today we're going to talk about some of the issues that she see that our audience and you should know about. Welcome to the show, Laura.
Oh, thanks for having me on, and thanks for just continuing to provide Cascade Media. I know with mainstream media no longer being mainstream, like your outlet is so important to our community. So thank you for thinking enough of me and my work to put me on your show.
Let's get where the tide meets the road. What's going on here in Kansas City that you feel that we need to have some sunshine on?
So to speak. So I love the Sunshine Law, I always say, is one of my favorite state laws because Missouri passes all kinds of crazy laws, but the Sunshine Law is one that's particularly good, and it allows for open and transparent government. So in essence, we as people who live here in Kansas City can write to our government anytime and just ask to see their receipts, right? You could ask for emails, invoices, any kind of thing. So I think it's funny you mentioned sunshine in your opening because I know you meant that more broadly than just the Sunshine Law, but we actually had filed a lawsuit against the city over violations of sunshine laws in Kansas City, Missouri. And so basically what we've done is we've asked for public records and we've been denied those. You might have seen a UMKC law professor named Randall Johnson. He also recently filed a lawsuit over an investigation that involved Osteria El Centro and Minsky's, and it was a race-based complaint for public accommodations, like they treated him differently because he's black, or that's what he alleges. And long story short, he couldn't even access his own records from City Hall over his formal complaint. So something funny is going on down there with public records, Mr. Nelson. And it seems kind of boring to the average person, but this is a really big deal. If they are hiding something that should be transparent to all, why? Why?
Well, we know why. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
this is what I say to my people per se. Information is one thing, but
Mm-hmm.
applied information is different. When you have the information and you apply it, they don't want you to be able to apply it to straighten the situation out.
That's
It's
right.
it's almost it seemed like uh Doge gone amok here in Kansas City
Mm-hmm.
as it relates to access to information.
It's funny you said that because there's a lot of comparisons between how our city's been run and the Trump administration. And I don't mean just like political ideologies. I think I mean like dictatorship and secrecy and things like that. There's like a lot of secrecy going on. So I think, you and I talked recently because there's been a whole lot of quick shuffling around at City Hall, and Brian Platt's no longer our city manager, and now Kamiko Gilmore is our acting city manager, which is really exciting. Like, does she? I think she's got a shot at the permanent job, and she would be the first Black woman city manager in our city, first woman in 100 years, Mr. Nelson. We have never in 100 years had a Black or a woman city manager or a Black woman city manager in a
How,
100 years.
how about one from Kansas City also?
And from Kansas City to boot, are you kidding me? What luck? And she's just lovely. If whether you know Kamiko or not, if you don't, like I said, it's because she's been keeping her head down, doing the job down there. She's worked for Senator Claire McCaskill. I think that's where she was when I first met her. She's worked at City Hall for a number of years, and most recently as the director of the tourism department. So she was an assistant city manager under Troy Schulte, very experienced. And I think one thing I know about Kamiko is she's not in the cliques. She's just head down, does her job. So I think we would be blessed and fortunate as a city to get her. And I think it'd be really our greatest fortune if we could get her in as city manager.
I like how you described her. Uh, Keeps her head down and gets to work because I think that's where I heard her name with Claire McCaskill, and that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And then the next thing I heard about her, I think it was something with the ministry or a husband or something, and
Yes.
then she next thing I know, assistant city manager, and I'm like, how did she get that? She hadn't even been in the headlines in a couple, keeping her head
That's right.
down.
That's right. She does her thing. She's a hard worker. I know she's the most social stuff I know about her is she's in a girls running group, right? That but her husband is a Methodist pastor. He was at Centennial for quite some time, over near 18th and Vine, right? He was at Centennial, is the church he's kind of known for, but he's a big deal in the Methodist church, and they're each their own powerhouses, but you wouldn't know it. Very down to earth, couple. I think we'd be really blessed to have her in that position, though.
I would think so. She knows the city. I get tired of City Hall every time a position comes up. They bring people from out of town, but from my political experience and my business experience, about 20 years ago, I learned why they do that. They bring the people in because they don't have supposedly no connections with the groups and what have you, and whoever brings them in
Neutrality.
basically
Hmm.
can be the puppet master over them and to a degree. But let's move on to Melissa Robinson on that vote for the city manager, and when she was the only one to vote against that, and then
Right.
they tried to give her some flack. Do you have anything to say about that, you personally or your organization?
Yeah.
And has anyone contacted you? Has that been any chatter about that?
I think white privilege is something that I experience even when I run my mouth. Mr. Nelson, I can get away with saying an awful lot kind of stuff because I'm a white woman and I know it, and I may as well take full advantage, right? So I absolutely was talking on Facebook very openly about this matter. So when Brian Platt was dismissed as city manager, and this is Lora McDonald, not the director of More Squared talking, but when Brian Platt was dismissed as city manager or put on suspension, at that time, Melissa Robinson, Councilwoman Robinson, was the only person amongst council and the mayor who had of this current council who had spoken out against him. Now, when he very first was hired, it should not be surprising to anyone because it was in the news at that time. It was well covered 4.5 years ago when he first was brought into Kansas City. First of all, a couple of things happened, right? It's not a secret that Mayor Lucas was going to, say goodbye to Troy Schulte. So Troy left on his own, the city manager, and that's not unusual for an administration to change city managers. So Troy now works for Jackson County, and he left on good terms with this city, but he was probably leaving. And then there was a process, and one of the things that I understand had happened from news media is Mayor Lucas went around the community and talked about the type of city manager. And in Councilwoman Robinson's third district, he said something to the effect of he would hire a Black woman city manager if that was who was most qualified. In other words, I would not rule that out. I would like that, is kind of the attitude and posture that he took in the third district, which I'm sure there were ample Black women at that meeting where he said that, and that was a very popular statement there. And then there were three finalists. I believe all three of them were African American candidates, and then here comes Brian Platt, and the mayor kind of slid him in, is what Councilwoman Robinson later would assert, is that there were three well ranked, the highest ranking people were all African American candidates, and Platt was slid in. This was 4.5 years ago. Also, at that time, 4.5 years ago, some people from Jersey were saying this guy's questionable. He has some allegations of racism against him in Jersey City, where he's from. So there's Black folks warning people like Councilwoman Robinson about him, and he's been slid in where he did not make the cut, it sounds like, as one of the top candidates. Later we would find out Mayor Lucas would later marry a woman who happens to be married to Brian Platt's, or first cousins with Brian Platt's wife. So Quentin Lucas married a woman who her first cousin was married to Brian Platt when they moved here. They're divorced now.
Well, that's a mouthful. When
That's a lot.
I had Eric Wesson on, we talked about that, and I told him I'm from the East Coast, and when they decided to bring him here, I was like, "Damn, I thought y'all had the candidates already lined up."
We did. Right.
Yeah, where did this guy come from? Then,
Right.
because I am from the East Coast, New York and Jersey,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people I know in Jersey, uh, I looked into it just a little bit. As I told you, I don't do the research that you and a lot of other people y'all do, but I found out a whole lot about him as it relates to his issues with Black women and Black people in general. And do you remember me earlier saying Doge Amok? Uh, some of the same things that he was doing in
Yeah.
Jersey has followed him here. But
Yep.
my thing is we have third district and fifth district at large and in large council people. What are they doing to represent us when these
Yeah.
type situations
Yeah.
uh, appear? Now,
Well,
going
yeah.
back to my interview with Eric Wesson, Eric uh, asserts that, because I said, well, why didn't our other council people vote with Melissa and blah, blah, blah? He
Right.
said he thought that our council people were trying to appease the mayor, wanted to stay on the good side of the mayor. And from my perspective, I live in the third district. Uh, you here to protect my interests. You're here to look out for the community. That's what we put you there
Touche.
for. And
Touche.
how do you feel about representation in general by uh, the people that's supposed to be representing our community? And when I say that, people of
Yeah.
color, it's not like, as far as I'm concerned, Kansas City, the white community, they're doing fine. It's my community that's suffering. It's not like I don't care about all of Kansas City, because my godfather called the capo. He
Um,
thrashed me a couple of times. He was like, Carlos, you have no business being involved in anything that's not good for all of Kansas City. And that man had a big influence on me for 30 years. And when I look at who represents us and how they represent us, uh, I'm looking at it with a jaundiced eye at this point because it
Mm.
seems like uh, financial considerations are taking precedent over what should be done for uh, our disadvantage.
So I agree with what you're saying. I never focus personally on what Black folks should or shouldn't do in positions of power, or if I do, I get myself in trouble, Mr. Nelson, because like I don't actually know what that's like, right? To be Black and hold public office. What I will say about how it all shook out is that first go around, you also had an Ellington and Lee Barnes and um, who else was it? Park Shaw, I believe, voted against Brian Platt the first go around. And this go around, I agree with Eric Wesson. I think that when you have the perception that the mayor's popular, or you have the perception, frankly, I have the perception that the mayor will maybe play some political tricks or games to, whatever, if you don't do kind of fall in line in this administration. I actually believe that about, this particular city government is that we do not have the structure for what we call a strong mayoral government in the United States. That's like St. Louis has more of a strong mayoral government. We do not, but that's how this government behaved, especially with Brian Platt and Mayor Lucas being as close as they were, to the point where there's really not been kind of checks and balances for us. And I
Separation
would
of power.
Yes, and I would go so far as to say, how money gets spent and stuff is a little questionable because of that relationship. And then I would say that someone like a Robinson, who is your in district, third district, councilwoman, and she is my personal friend, I would say that when someone like a Robinson behaves as she does, it makes her wildly unpopular. I mean, what are her chances then to get on a platform to run for mayor when he ostracizes her? What happened when Brian Platt was immediately after Chris Hernandez verdict, right? So there's a $930,000 judgment against our city. It is not the first discrimination lawsuit against Platt, but Platt definitely lied on the stand in this case. Like there's evidence that he was lying, right? And there's this 930,000, nearly $1 million judgment that case alone cost us. And then there's been millions and millions of other judgments, Mr. Nelson. 1 year 9 million, 1 year, another year 23 million. These major settlements, and the city attorney gets way too much discretion in that settlement. But the city attorney works for Platt, right? So when Platt was immediately put on suspension, it's my understanding from media that he then hires attorneys and they kind of go on this weird media tour, and he dangles that he was discriminated against as a white person. And I just like would far rather speak about as a white person, like what should have happened in that scenario. What he fails to recognize is it is his white privilege that got him an interview in the first place. It's possibly through white family members that even made contact like that and got an interview, and then that he slid in. That's what people suggest goes on with affirmative action, but it really happens all the time with white people. Like he slid in when he was not one of the top three candidates. And again, I think the mayor had the right to do that. The mayor did it. But then he became like, it was obvious in those public interviews that's going to be the guy that gets picked. And then he gets picked, and no Black council people, they are waving, saying, hey, this guy has some discrimination charges, at least slow this down. They hire him anyway with four Black council people voting against him. And then when they go to renew his contract after 23 23 million one year, 9 million another year judgments. They go to renew this guy's contract and he gets a substantial raise. Like, it's really outrageous. And then the way he says he was discriminated against is he somehow has an email. We don't know how, but it didn't come from Robinson. She wrote an email to Mayor Lucas saying, like, why did you hire this white guy, basically? And it's the same thing I'm saying right now. That's not racist. That is sounding the alarm at white privilege and how he bypassed what Clinton said he was going to do. He said he would hire the most qualified candidate if that was a Black woman, and he failed to do that because this guy jumped in line, right? That's what we think she was calling out. And then this joker has the audacity to pull that email. We don't even know where he got the email because it was between two parties and he wasn't one of them. He pulls that out and gives it to the media as to why he was discriminated against. Sir, you got a contract already and then a second contract plus a raise. If that is not the definition of white privilege, I don't know what is. And he called that race discrimination and is apparently threatening to sue us, which led to, like, people talking about Robinson some kind of way in other alternative media sources that we don't give credence to. But it was really the audacity of it all and then, the caucasity of it all, right?
Well, tell me this. You know that Kansas City is talking about 2026, the World Cup,
Hmm.
and all of that. And we're talking about a lot of money uh, being spent. And with us having a city manager form of government, how do you think all of this plays out with all this confusion? And uh, do you think that, again, I'm back on third and fifth district at large and in district council people. Uh, I don't feel that they have served my community well, and a couple of them, they need to reevaluate who they're working for and who they're representing. Do you have any feelings on that?
I just think this is such an exciting time for council if they utilized it, right? This is the first council that I can remember that's majority people of color, Mr. Nelson. That has never happened before. If you include Crispin Ray, a Latino man, and Jonathan Duncan, who is Latino, I believe, as well as I don't know if he's a multiracial. So I think this could be a really exciting time for those groups to join forces and do something really unprecedented. But I think there's these camps that we've described that one of them has circled around Mayor Lucas and the other is kind of off doing their own thing. So I don't know what's going to end up happening long term in Kansas City. I don't think Mayor Lucas tends to side with a block that is, we're going to promote things for the Black community. That's not my experience with him per se. So I would say those council could do something if they should choose to galvanize together. And I don't know, maybe this Brian Platt, this transition could be a time for them to turn the corner and really go, what is best for what is best for you. You mentioned the late Mr. DiCapo, who was a mentor to me as well. I just talked to his son, John David, the other day. He's delightful. I think what's interesting that you said, though, is you don't do anything just for the Black community. But what I would suggest is doing for the third or the fifth, and in many cases, doing for the third lifts up the whole city. And we have not had adequate investment in the third. I live north of the river. I live up by Zona Rosa. You're right. We've got trails, we got nice sidewalks. We're okay. And our council people up here take up for us too, on top of that. So yeah,
Seriously, they just don't
yeah,
take up. They be going to war like Conan
yeah,
the Barbarian.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I still want to invest most of my money where I work, which is my office is in the third. My office is near Linwood and Prospect, Linwood and Olive to be exact. So I like you, Mr. Nelson, believe that there needs to be more investment, but it can't be a sole voice, and it can't even be two. It's got to be really a galvanizing of the voices at City Hall with a different level of understanding that what when you do for the third district, you are doing something for all of Kansas City. And this mindset has long been that when you do for downtown, you're doing something for all of Kansas City. When you do for the plaza, you're doing something for all of Kansas City. And that couldn't be more, that's one of our most exclusive areas, right? So why is it not that doing for the third is doing something for all the city? I think if you lift up the district that's experienced the least investment, that's the way to go, right? That's the way to go.
So, what are some of the issues out there where you're at, Northland?
I'd like to know. I think, they build more roundabouts like we're European or something. I don't know. Have you seen the roundabouts up here?
No, Miss Nelson don't get out like that.
Yeah, they like to build
I went
roundabouts and
downtown.
golf courses in the Northland. I don't know. Like, if you like to golf, this is a nice spot, but I hear Swope Parkway is nice too. My
Well,
son,
the bicycle lane. See, I don't understand a lot of this, like in the third district and different. I'm like, those are black districts per se. It's not like black people don't ride bikes, but black people don't ride bikes to the extent you're going to spend that type of money to put some bike lanes when
that's,
our
well,
infrastructure's broke down, our
it
school
it
district.
wouldn't be your priority, right? It
Right.
wouldn't be your priority. And in fact, it's upsetting to physically be deterred or inconvenienced by them, knowing there's so many more pressing priorities. I think one day that landed on my heart when I was driving down Armour Boulevard, where I used to live when I first moved to Kansas City, and I was making like $19,000 a year. My rent was $475 a month. And to see what that neighborhood has become and how gentrified it is, and then the bike lanes, and it's just there's so many more pressing things in our city. So it's not that I'm against cycling, of course I'm not, but yeah, you're right. There are black cyclists. Shout out to my friend Calvin Jones, who lives at 30th and Jackson. He cycles, but not everybody wants to prioritize bike lanes. And so it's funny you mentioned all of that, because we have at Central Christian Church, which is on Linwood, right by Central High School, we have what's a partnership with Reverend Antoine Lee and his church that is called an environmental action hub. And I think they're going to have an event around May 3rd. You'll have to find us on Facebook. It's just more2.org on the web. But what we're trying to do, Mr. Nelson, is connect the community with green jobs. We're trying to connect the community with understanding about where you can get solutions on things like anything from lead paint to sidewalk disrepair. We really want to build power in the community that's like roughly the Prospect Corridor. And I think you could think about it like it's kind of the third council district. We really want to build power in that part of our city so people can tackle some of these issues of disinvestment.
You
And
know anything
so,
about the Northeast?
what about the Northeast?
I'm saying about what's going on in that part of town. Like I said, I can't be everywhere, and I rely on people like you that are what I call boots on the ground.
You
I'm
know,
in a
I would,
helicopter, and
I,
and y'all are doing hand to hand combat with the people that are on welfare, people that are having medical issues with using Rogers Hospital, Swope Parkway.
Mhm.
Y'all are there where you're not calling in on a line. I know that you have a personal contact with your constituents personally.
Yeah, we have one church in Northeast, and then we have one um community group that's a partner that's located in Northeast. That's RevEd, or Latinx Education Collaborative. They're in on Lexington in Northeast. And then we have a church on Independence Boulevard that we partner with, Independence Boulevard Christian Church. Northeast is such an interesting area. I think that there's some really interesting neighborhood groups there that are starting to rethink things and have some success, right? And redeveloping housing themselves and things like that. But I don't think I have a full picture, but I could always recommend folks for the show from there, you
That's
know?
what we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Like Edgar Palacios over at he happens to be my board chair at More Squared. And then he's at Revolucion Educativa as well as Latinx Education Collaborative. He co-founded those organizations, and he could give you a real hot view. And then tomorrow, we have the school board election, so we're keeping an eye on that. Those are the things, the big things that we're working on right now, Mr. Nelson. And then we're launching some new initiatives inside the faith community right now.
All right. Well, it's about the time to close it on down. Uh, what would
Good
you
to see
have
you.
to say to our community and closing it down?
Yeah, I think I've always got to plug More Squared. We're a 21-year-old or 20-year-old racial justice organization, and we work metro wide. And so we're always looking for what are those big systemic issues that we need to tackle together, and where can the faith community really show up representing justice instead of some of this crazy stuff they've represented over the past few years in America. So I would just say find us on it's more2.org, or go through Facebook and find us. And one of the staff will be happy to sit down and talk to you about where you might fit in.
All righty. Without I'm gonna steal my boy Jim Watts. He was one of the founders of What's Up Kansas City.
Oh, yeah.
And Watts, he always closing his interviews with, "It was a plum pleasing pleasure having you on the show." I be like, Watts, cut it out, man. You know,
He is doing the most.
yeah. But as we always close, when you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself. Good night.
This is brought to you by Kansas City Business Association, working to improve our community.